Amina and the Drums of Rain. Long, long ago, in a place where the red earth stretched as far as the eye could see, there lived a village called Sun Village. The people had given it this name because the sun seemed to love their land so much that it never wanted to leave. From dawn until dusk, the golden orb blazed overhead, painting everything in warm, bright colors. But now, the sun had stayed too long. For 12 moons, not a single drop of rain had fallen from the sky. The once green fields had turned brown and cracked like broken pottery. The mighty baobab trees, which had stood tall for hundreds of years, drooped their branches sadly toward the earth. The village wells, which had bubbled with sweet, cool water since the time of the ancestors, were now nothing but empty holes filled with dust and the memories of better days. In this troubled village lived a young girl named Amina. She was 9 years old, with eyes as bright as morning stars and hair that her grandmother always braided with tiny cowrie shells. Amina was known throughout Sun Village for 3 things: her curious nature, her kind heart, and her ability to find hope even in the darkest times. Every morning, Amina would wake before the first cockcrow crowed and walk to the village square with her clay pot. She would join the long line of women and children, all hoping that perhaps today, just perhaps, one of the wells might have a few drops of water to spare. But day after day, they all returned home with empty pots and heavy hearts. The people of Sun Village were growing desperate. The children's laughter had become as rare as rain clouds. The elders sat under the shade of the withered trees, shaking their grey heads and wondering what they had done to anger the sky spirits. Even the village dogs lay panting in whatever shade they could find, too tired to bark or play. Amina lived with her grandmother, Mama Kesai, in a small hut on the edge of the village. Mama Kesai was the oldest person in Sun Village, so old that some said she remembered when the first baobab tree was planted. Her grandmother had raised Amina since she was a baby, filling her days with stories of the ancestors and teaching her the old ways. "Grandmother," Amina said one particularly hot afternoon, as they sat in their hut trying to escape the burning sun, "why do you think the rain has forgotten us?" Mama Kesai looked at her granddaughter with eyes that held the wisdom of many seasons. "Child, the rain has not forgotten us. Sometimes, the world has its own rhythms, like a great drum that beats in patterns we do not always understand. We must be patient and keep our hearts open to whatever lessons the sky wishes to teach us." But Amina found it hard to be patient when she saw her friends growing thin and weak, when the village animals searched desperately for water, and when even the strongest men in the village looked worried as they gazed at the endless blue sky. That evening, as the sun finally set and painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, Amina decided to explore her grandmother's hut more thoroughly. She had always been a curious child, and there were many corners of their home that seemed to hold secrets. While Mama Kesai dozed in her chair, Amina crept to the back of the hut where old clay pots and woven baskets were stored. Behind a large basket filled with dried herbs, Amina noticed something she had never seen before. Pushing the basket aside, she discovered a small wooden chest, carved with intricate patterns of lightning bolts, clouds, and falling rain. The chest was old, so old that the wood had turned almost black, and it felt warm to the touch despite being in the shade. With trembling fingers, Amina opened the chest. Inside, nestled like a sleeping child, was the most beautiful drum she had ever seen. It was not large, about the size of a cooking pot, but it seemed to glow with an inner light. The drum head was made of hide so smooth it looked like water, and painted on it were swirling patterns that seemed to move when Amina looked at them closely. The drum's body was carved from a wood she didn't recognize, dark as a moonless night but shot through with silver veins that sparkled like stars. "Oh my," whispered Amina, lifting the drum carefully from the chest. It was surprisingly light, as if it were made of clouds rather than wood and hide. She had always loved music and dancing. During the good times, before the drought, the village would hold festivals where everyone would sing and dance to the rhythm of many drums. Amina had often watched the drummers and tried to copy their movements with her hands on her knees or on clay pots. Now, holding this mysterious drum, she felt an irresistible urge to play it. Looking around to make sure her grandmother was still sleeping, Amina crept outside with the drum. The night was clear and hot, with a million stars twinkling overhead like scattered diamonds. She sat cross-legged in the dirt and placed the drum in her lap. The moment her hands touched the drum head, she felt a tingling sensation, as if tiny lightning bolts were dancing through her fingers. Without thinking, she began to tap a simple rhythm, tap, 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 the same rhythm her heart was beating. Something magical happened. The moment the first beat echoed into the night air, the stars seemed to twinkle more brightly. A cool breeze, the first anyone had felt in months, began to blow across the village. And then, incredibly, impossibly, clouds began to gather in the sky. Amina stopped drumming, her mouth hanging open in amazement. The clouds were small at first, no bigger than her grandmother's cooking pot, but they grew larger and darker with each passing moment. Soon, the entire sky was covered with thick, grey clouds that rumbled with distant thunder. And then it happened. The first drop of rain fell on Amina's nose. Then another on her hand. Then dozens, then hundreds, then thousands of drops began to fall from the sky. It was raining. Really, truly raining. Amina laughed with joy and danced in the falling water, still clutching the magical drum. All around the village, she could hear people shouting with happiness, running out of their huts to stand in the blessed rain. Children were crying with relief, and adults were singing songs of thanksgiving. But the rain didn't last long. After only a few minutes, the clouds began to clear, the drops slowed, and soon the sky was full of stars again. Still, those few minutes of rain had been enough to fill some of the smaller wells and give everyone hope that their terrible drought might finally be ending. The next morning, the entire village was buzzing with excitement and confusion. How had it rained when there hadn't been a cloud in the sky for months? Was it a miracle? A sign from the ancestors? People gathered in small groups, talking in excited whispers and looking up at the sky hopefully. Amina said nothing about the drum. She had hidden it back in the chest before returning to the hut, and when her grandmother woke that morning, Amina pretended to be as surprised about the rain as everyone else. "Did you feel it, grandmother?" Amina asked, trying to keep her voice casual. "The rain last night." Mama Kesai looked at her granddaughter with a strange expression. "Yes, child. I felt it. And I heard something else too. I heard the voice of the sky spirits, speaking through music that sounded like drums." Amina's heart skipped a beat, but she just nodded and went to help prepare their simple breakfast. That day, as the village celebrated their small miracle, Amina couldn't stop thinking about the drum. She wanted to play it again, to bring more rain to her thirsty people. But something in her grandmother's words made her hesitate. The voice of the sky spirits. What did that mean? As the sun reached its peak and the brief dampness from the night's rain evaporated, the people of some village began to look hopefully at the sky again. By afternoon, when no more clouds appeared, their hope began to turn back into worry. "Perhaps it was just a tease," said one of the women at the well. "Maybe the sky spirits are testing us," said another. That evening, when her grandmother was tending to her small garden behind their hut, Amina crept back to the chest. She had to help her people. She had to bring more rain. This time, she played the drum for longer, letting her hands find a more complex rhythm. The magic worked even better than before. Clouds gathered more quickly, and the rain fell harder and longer. For almost an hour, blessed water poured from the sky, filling wells and watering the thirsty plants. The village celebrated even more joyfully that second night. People danced in the rain, filled every pot and jar they owned, and began to talk about planting crops again. But Amina noticed that playing the drum left her feeling strangely tired, as if the magic were drawing energy from her own body. Still, seeing the happiness on everyone's faces made it seem worthwhile. On the third night, Amina played the drum again. And the fourth. And the fifth voice is too faint to understand but somehow sad and urgent. It was on the sixth morning that Grace and John came to see Mama Kesai. Grace and John were the two eldest members of the village council, the keepers of the old wisdom and traditions. Grace was a tall woman with silver hair braided with beads that clicked when she walked. She knew more stories about the ancestors than anyone else in the village. John was a gentleman with scars on his arms from his many years as the village's protector. His eyes were kind but sharp, and people said he could see truths that others missed. They sat with Mama Kesai under the shade of the old baobab tree near her hut, and their voices were serious and low. "Something strange is happening, old friend," Grace said to Mama Kesai. "The rain comes every night now, but only for a short time, and only when we hear the sound of a drum echoing across the village." John nodded gravely. "The spirits are restless. I can feel it in the air. There is magic at work here, but it is not the natural magic of the seasons. Someone is calling the rain with power that does not belong to mortals." Amina, who was supposed to be inside helping with the cooking, crept closer to listen. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure the elders would hear it. "We have searched the entire village," Grace continued. "No one admits to owning such a drum. But the sound is clear and close. It comes from this part of the village, perhaps even from this very area." Mama Kesai was quiet for a long moment. Then she sighed deeply. "Come inside," she said. "There is something I must show you, and something I must confess." The three elders entered the hut, and Amina had no choice but to follow. Her grandmother led them to the back of the hut and pointed to the wooden chest. "Many years ago," Mama Kesai began, "when I was just a young woman, I was chosen by the sky spirits to be the guardian of this sacred drum. It was given to my family by the ancestors themselves, passed down through generations of keepers who understood its power and its price." She opened the chest and revealed the drum. Even in the dim light of the hut, it seemed to pulse with mysterious energy, though Amina noticed that its glow was definitely dimmer than when she had first found it. Grace and John gasped when they saw the drum. They immediately bowed their heads in respect. "The rain drum of the sky spirits," John whispered. "I have heard stories of it, but I never believed. It was lost generations ago." "Not lost," Mama Kesai corrected. "Hidden. Hidden because the last keeper learned what I should have taught my granddaughter before she discovered it on her own." All three elders turned to look at Amina, who was trying to make herself as small as possible in the corner of the hut. "You know about this, don't you, child?" Grace asked gently. Amina could no longer keep her secret. With tears in her eyes, she told them everything: how she had found the drum, how she had played it to bring rain to the village, and how much weaker she felt each time she used it. When she finished her story, the three elders sat in silence for a long time. Finally, Mama Kesai spoke. "The rain drum is one of the most powerful artifacts left to us by the ancestors," she explained. "It can indeed call rain, but it was never meant to be used by humans except in the most desperate circumstances. The drum belongs to the sky spirits, and they only loan it to us when the natural balance of the world is threatened." "But we are desperate," Amina protested. "Our people are suffering. The wells are dry, and the crops have failed. Isn't this exactly the kind of emergency when we should use it?" John shook his head sadly. "Child, the drought is part of a natural cycle. These dry periods have happened before, and they will happen again. The earth is not broken, it is simply resting. The rains will return when it is their proper time." "But when would that be?" Amina asked, frustrated. "How long must we wait? How much longer must we suffer?" Grace leaned forward and took Amina's hands gently. "That is the hardest lesson of all, young one. Some things cannot be rushed, no matter how much we wish they could be. The rain that comes from the sacred drum is not the same as natural rain. It does not nourish the earth properly, and it comes at a cost." "What cost?" Amina asked, though part of her already knew the answer. Mama Kesai sighed. Every time the drum is played, it takes something from the person who plays it. First energy, then health, then years of life. And eventually, if it is used too much, it takes the person's spirit entirely. They become part of the drum, trapped forever between the earth and sky. Amina shivered. She thought about how tired she had been feeling, how sometimes when she played the drum she felt as if she were floating away from her own body. But there is something else, John added. Something even more important. The drum must be returned to the sky spirits voluntarily. If it is kept by humans too long, or if it is used for selfish purposes, it will bring not blessings but curses. The rain it calls will turn to floods, the winds will become storms, and the very magic that saved the village will destroy it. How do we return it? Amina asked quietly. That is something only the one who has been using it can do, Grace explained. The spirits have accepted you as the drum's temporary keeper. Only you can give it back to them. But it must be your choice, made freely and with a pure heart. Amina looked at the drum, sitting quietly in its chest. It no longer seemed beautiful to her. Instead, it seemed sad and tired, like a bird trapped in a cage, longing to fly free. But if I return it, she said, what will happen to our village? What will happen to all the people who are depending on the rain? The village will endure, Mama Kesai said firmly. Our people are strong. We have survived droughts before, and we will survive this one. And when the natural rains return, as they will, the joy will be all the greater because we waited for them patiently and earned them through our perseverance. That night, Amina lay on her sleeping mat staring at the ceiling of the hut. Outside, she could hear people talking excitedly about the rain that would surely come again. They were already making plans for planting crops and celebrating the end of their troubles. How could she disappoint them? How could she let them go back to the suffering and worry of the past months? But she also thought about what the elders had said. She remembered the whispers she had heard from the drum, and how each time she played it, she felt a little more distant from herself. Was it really helping people if the help came at such a cost? The next day, word spread through the village that the mysterious drummer had been discovered. People began coming to Mama Kesai's hut, asking to see Amina and the magical drum. Please, begged Fatima, a young mother whose baby had been crying from thirst. Just one more rain. Just enough to fill our well completely. The spirits have blessed you with this power, said Kofi, one of the village farmers. Surely they meant for you to use it to help your people. Don't listen to the old ones, whispered Janiba, pulling Amina aside. They are afraid of change, afraid of power they don't understand. You can save us all. You can be the hero our village needs. All day long, people came with their pleas and their praise. They called Amina a miracle worker, a chosen one, a gift from the ancestors. Some even suggested that she should be made the new leader of the village, since she clearly had the favor of the spirits. The attention was overwhelming, and Amina found herself torn between pride and worry. It felt good to be seen as special, to be needed and praised. But it also felt wrong somehow, as if she were taking credit for something that didn't truly belong to her. That evening, as the sun set and people began to gather expectantly outside her hut, waiting for the nightly rain, Amina made a decision. She took the drum from its chest and walked outside. The villagers cheered when they saw her, and several began to dance in anticipation of the coming rain. But instead of sitting down to play, Amina walked past them all, heading for the highest hill outside the village. This was the place where the ancestors were buried, where the oldest baobab tree in the area stood like a sentinel between earth and sky. Where are you going? Called Fatima. We need the rain, shouted Kofi. But Amina kept walking, with Grace, John, and Mama Kesai following behind her. The rest of the village streamed after them, confused and worried. At the top of the hill, under the ancient baobab tree, Amina finally stopped. She turned to face the crowd of villagers who had followed her. My friends, she said, her young voice carrying clearly in the still air. I have something to tell you about this drum, and about the rain it brings. She told them everything the elders had told her, about the true nature of the drum, about the cost of using it, and about the need to return it to the sky spirits. When she finished, the crowd was silent for a moment. Then the protests began. You can't give it back, cried Geneva. Think of all the good you could do. The elders are just jealous of your power, shouted someone from the back of the crowd. One more night, pleaded Fatima. Just give us one more night of rain. Amina looked out at all the faces, desperate, angry, pleading, confused. These were her people, her friends and neighbors. They were suffering, and she had the power to help them. How could she choose to let them suffer when she could prevent it? But then she looked at the drum in her hands, and she heard those faint whispers again. This time, she could almost make out the words, "Free us, please, let us go home." And suddenly, Amina understood. The spirits trapped in the drum were suffering too. They had been bound to this earthly artifact, forced to create rain on command, kept from their natural place in the sky. By using the drum, she wasn't just risking her own spirit, she was prolonging the captivity of others. I'm sorry, she said to the crowd, her voice steady despite her tears. I know you're angry with me. I know you think I'm making the wrong choice. But I can't keep using something that doesn't belong to me, something that hurts others, even if it helps us. Before anyone could stop her, Amina raised the drum high above her head and spoke to the sky. Sky spirits, ancestors, I return this sacred drum to you freely and with a clean heart. Take it back to where it belongs, and forgive us for keeping it too long. She placed the drum on the ground and stepped back. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a wind began to blow, not the hot, dry wind they had known for months, but a cool, sweet wind that smelled of distant rain and growing things. The wind grew stronger, and the drum began to glow brighter and brighter until it was almost too bright to look at. The villagers watched in amazement as the drum slowly lifted off the ground, carried by the wind. It rose higher and higher, until it disappeared among the stars. And then, something beautiful happened. The stars themselves seemed to pulse with gratitude, growing brighter and then dimmer in a rhythm like a heartbeat. A voice came from the sky, not words, but a feeling that filled everyone's hearts with warmth and peace. It was the voice of the freed spirits, thanking Amina for her sacrifice and promising that her kindness would not be forgotten. But the crowd of villagers didn't feel peaceful. As the glow of the drum faded and the wind died down, many of them turned on Amina with anger. What have you done? Cried Geneva. You've doomed us all. Selfish girl, shouted Kofi. You could have saved us, and instead you threw away our only hope. Some of the younger men in the crowd stepped forward menacingly, and for a moment, Amina was afraid they might actually hurt her. But Grace, John, and Mama Kesai moved to stand protectively around her. Enough. Grace's voice rang out like a bell, clear and commanding. You forget yourselves. This child has shown more wisdom and courage than all of you combined. She has doomed us to die of thirst, protested one of the farmers. No, said John firmly. She has saved us from something much worse than thirst. She has saved us from becoming dependent on magic we don't understand, from losing our connection to the natural world, and from the curse that would have eventually fallen on our village. But the crowd was too angry and scared to listen to reason. Many of them left the hilltop muttering threats and curses. They returned to the village feeling betrayed and hopeless. In the days that followed, Amina became an outcast in her own home. People avoided her on the paths, mothers pulled their children away when she approached, and former friends turned their backs when they saw her coming. The drought continued. The wells remained dry, the crops withered, and the suffering went on. Every day that passed without rain made the villagers angrier at Amina. Some said she should be banished from the village. Others whispered that she was cursed and would bring bad luck to anyone who helped her. Through it all, Mama Kesai, Grace, and John remained loyal to Amina. They reminded her that she had done the right thing, even when it was the hardest thing. But Amina couldn't help but wonder if the villagers were right. Maybe she should have kept the drum. Maybe helping people was more important than following ancient rules. 3 weeks after she had returned the drum to the sky spirits, Amina sat alone by the dry riverbed that ran past the village. She often came here when she needed to think, throwing pebbles into the dust where water used to flow. She was so lost in thought that she almost didn't notice when the wind began to blow. But this was different from the magical wind that had carried away the drum. This was a natural wind, carrying real clouds from the distant mountains. Amina looked up and gasped. The sky was full of clouds, not the quick, thin clouds that had come from the magic drum, but thick, heavy clouds that promised a real storm. And then it began to rain. Not a brief shower, but a steady, soaking rain that fell for hours. It filled the riverbed where Amina sat, it poured into the empty wells, it soaked deep into the earth and brought the smell of growing things back to the air. All over the village, people came running out of their huts, laughing and crying with joy. Children played in the puddles, adults filled every container they could find, and the animals drank deeply from the newly filled streams. But this time, no one thanked Amina. In fact, many people seemed to avoid looking at her as they celebrated. They were embarrassed, she realized. Embarrassed that they had been so angry with her when she had been right all along. Over the following days, as the natural rains continued to fall regularly, life in some village began to return to normal. The wells filled completely, crops began to sprout in the fields, and the children's laughter returned to the air. Gradually, people began to approach Amina again. At first, it was just shy nods of acknowledgement. Then brief conversations. Finally, Geneva came to her with tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said. "I was so scared and desperate that I couldn't see past my own needs. You were braver than all of us, and wiser too. I hope you can forgive me." One by one, others in the village came to offer their apologies. They had learned, they said, that some problems couldn't be solved quickly, and that sometimes the hardest choice was also the right choice. But the most important lesson came on the evening when the village held a celebration to mark the end of the drought. As everyone gathered around the fire to share stories and songs, Grace stood up to speak. "We have learned something important these past months," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the gathering. "We have learned that true wisdom is not about having power, but about knowing when not to use it. We have learned that some gifts come with prices too high to pay, and that the best leaders are those who put the needs of others, even the needs of spirits we cannot see, before their own desires." She looked directly at Amina as she continued. "Our young friend here could have been seen as a hero for bringing us rain. Instead, she chose to be seen as a fool for returning the power that brought it. But in doing so, she showed us what real heroism looks like. It looks like sacrifice. It looks like doing what is right even when no one understands or appreciates it." John stood up next. "The ancestors say that the greatest magic is not in controlling nature, but in understanding our place within it. Amina understood that we are not meant to command the sky, but to live in harmony with its rhythms." As the celebration continued into the night, with drumming and dancing and singing, Amina felt a deep peace settle over her heart. She had made the right choice, even though it had been the hardest choice. She had learned that being a hero sometimes meant being misunderstood, and that true wisdom often looked like foolishness to those who valued power over balance. From that day forward, Amina was known throughout the region as the girl who gave back the rain. Her story was told around fires in villages far and wide, teaching children and adults alike about the importance of wisdom, sacrifice, and respect for the natural world. She grew up to become one of the most respected elders in some village, sought out by people from many communities for her advice and wisdom. She never forgot the lesson of the magic drum, that some powers are too great for mortals to wield, and that the greatest strength sometimes lies in knowing when to let go. And in some village, the rains came regularly from that season forward, following their ancient patterns as they had before the drought. The people learned to store water during the wet seasons and conserve it during the dry times. They learned to read the signs of the sky and work with nature rather than trying to control it. Sometimes, on nights when the stars were particularly bright, the villagers would swear they could hear faint drumming in the distance, not calling for rain, but celebrating the harmony between earth and sky. And they would smile, knowing that somewhere among the stars, the spirits of the drum were finally free to dance with the clouds and play with the wind as they were meant to do. The wooden chest that had once held the magic drum remained in Mama Kesai's hut, but now it held something different, the written story of what had happened, recorded so that future generations would remember the lesson Amina had taught. The story ended with these words: "True power is not in taking what we want, but in giving back what is not ours to keep. The greatest magic is not in commanding the forces of nature, but in understanding our place within the great rhythm of the world. And the bravest hero is not the one who uses power to solve every problem, but the one who knows when the most loving thing to do is to let go." And so the people of some village lived in harmony with the rains and the sun, the wet seasons and the dry, learning to find abundance not in controlling nature, but in dancing with its eternal rhythms. They told Amina's story to their children, and their children told it to their children, ensuring that the wisdom of the girl who gave back the rain would never be forgotten. The village prospered, not because they had power over the weather, but because they had learned to live wisely within its cycles. And that, the elders said, was the greatest magic of all.